Jeremy Corbyn has today announced he will stand as an independent candidate in Islington North. He's represented the constituency since 1983, and here's his pitch to continue doing so.
We've achieved some fantastic victories together, and that is what being the local MP is all about. I believe in democracy. I want our political parties to be democratic, but members of Islington North Labour have been denied the right to choose their own candidate, and alongside that, the community as a whole has been disempowered because of that. So we have to stand up. We have to stand up and say, we're not taking this anymore. We will assert our rights. That's why I'm standing to be an independent candidate for the people of Islington North. This country has become more divided than ever. There are more people living in desperate poverty than I've ever known. There are more people using food banks and more families wondering how on earth they can make ends meet. Young people who can't get anywhere to live, people with children living in a very overcrowded place, people in the private rented sector facing high rents and insecurity. We're not going to end any of this without fundamental change, fundamental redistribution of power and of wealth, public ownership of water, mail, energy companies. Other countries manage to control rent and control the private rented sector. Why can't we? And a health service that isn't the plaything of global corporations trying to take it over, but is our health service for us. These fundamental demands are not being presented by the official opposition at the moment. Yet they are the demands of millions of people all over the country.
So the full video is about 3 minutes long, so slightly longer. He sort of talks about the victories he's had in his constituency. Then he's obviously talking about the undemocratic nature of his inability to stand as a Labour MP. And we're then talking about how sort of he'll be arguing for more transformative policies in Parliament if he is elected. And of course, the inevitable response to Corbyn standing as an independent was his expulsion from the Labour Party. You get an automatic expulsion if you stand against a Labour candidate or support someone who stands against a Labour candidate. And Novara Media's Moyat McLean got Jeremy Corbyn's reaction today.
This obviously means that you've been expelled from the party that you've been a lifelong member of. How are you feeling about that?
Well, I feel very sad. I joined the Labour Party when I was 17 years old, and I've held within the Labour Party every position there is to hold, from being a street collector in the days when people paid their subscriptions by cash, to being branch secretary, branch chair, constituency agent, regional executive member, member of parliament, and leader of the party. I've held every single position there is. And this morning, a few minutes after I made the announcement, I got a short formal letter saying, you're no longer a member of the Labour Party.
So it was ready and waiting to go, you think?
Clearly somebody came in early to make sure it happened.
The rest of that interview with Corbyn will be on our channel later this weekend, so do look out for that. Aaron, this is a surprise to absolutely no one. I mean, I think everyone's been aware. Corbyn's pretty much made it clear that he will be standing in Islington North. Everyone now is going to be asking the question, can he win? Can he win it?
He certainly can win it. And I actually think, Michael, Labour have fast-tracked their candidate now. There will be no hustings. There will be no anonymous voter voting. Although is that really voting? Who knows? There's some big questions around an anonymous voter. So, I mean, it was surprising so much as the general election was a surprise, and the Labour Party thought that they had time to do their online hustings and whatnot. But what's interesting for me, Michael, with Labour and the candidates they had, they shortlisted two candidates. I think one was a councillor, one is a member of the London Assembly. There were no big hitters. Mary Cray was being, touted at one point, former Labour MPs who may have lost in 2019, or MEPs, people who were close to the Labour establishment, so to speak. They weren't being touted, they weren't involved. And I find that really interesting. And I suspect it indicates a general concern that they might not win. It might be quite close. And actually, if you don't win, it's a poison chalice and you'll be remembered forever as the person that lost Jeremy Corbyn, who stood as an independent. So, look, it's not over. Corbyn has to go out and win it. But the idea that it's a dead cert for Labour, I think, is nonsensical. And you know that just by looking at the candidates who were shortlisted.
Let's go on to another Labour left politician, or someone who is still a Labour politician, who currently doesn't hold the party whip, although is still a party member. Of course, we're talking about Diane Abbott. Keir Starmer was asked today whether she will be allowed to stand as a Labour candidate?
The final decisions on candidates is coming up in a few days' time, I think June the 4th. It may be a little earlier, a little later, I can't quite remember. But within a relatively short period of time, the final list of candidates will be decided, and that'll be a matter for the Labour Party's National Executive Committee.
If she's not a candidate, how comfortable are you that Natalie Elphicke will be a Labour candidate and not Diane Abbott?
Natalie Elphicke won't be a Labour candidate. She's standing down at this election. We have an excellent candidate in Dover.
So Keir Starmer there still not willing to commit to what will happen with Diane Abbott. Now, you might think if they're leaving it to, because I think the line today is that the decision will be made about Diane Abbott on the final day where you can apply to be an MP. The deadline for the Labour Party deciding who will be standing in each candidate. Is it the application or the deadline for deciding? I'm not sure. But having such a tight schedule does make it seem like potentially they are going to give her the whip back, because otherwise they'd have to sort of decide on the same day who will be the Labour candidate, which does seem like a somewhat divisive way of doing it. But I suppose the rule up until now has been that the Labour Party has been fairly ruthless in terms of excluding people it doesn't want on its benches. And it doesn't seem like Keir Starmer wants Diane Abbott on their benches. There has, though, been, I suppose, uniquely when compared to Jeremy Corbyn, for example, people from different wings of the party have been calling for Diane Abbott to be readmitted. I know I've seen sort of John McTernan on Twitter. I think Angela Rayner's actually sort of said that she'd quite like Diane Abbott to get the whip back. So there are lots of people who do seem to think this situation is unfair. Aaron, if you were a betting man, do you think Diane Abbott will be standing in Hackney North, my constituency actually, as a Labour MP?
If I had to bet on it, I would say yes. It doesn't mean I think it's likely, but I think all the things you're saying add up. And again, bear in mind, this is Labour's first black female MP. Would you really want to be the person who is, who deals that final blow to her political career? I mean, I don't think any decent person would. Of course, there are many indecent people in politics, but no. I just don't think that's wise. There are lots of ambitious, unscrupulous people out there, but that really would take the biscuit. It's not like Jeremy Corbyn. She didn't really do, she did something wrong, but, standing for another party or as an independent is, auto expulsion. She's apologised. She's not really a sort of a potential centre of power in Parliament in the way that obviously Corbyn would be as a Labour MP. So no, I think reasonably they should look at her as being an older parliamentarian. She'll probably do one term, maybe two. And, she'll have the issues she's always campaigned on very vociferously. But who knows, Michael? This is the problem with Starmer's people, is that sometimes, they're not reasonable, particularly towards the left. There is a level of enmity and nastiness that actually, from a political calculative perspective, doesn't make sense. So who knows? But if I had to bet on it, I would say that she'd be the Labour candidate for her constituency.
I wouldn't bet much money on it because it definitely could go either way. But you could see it as sort of a, if they are trying to get a little bit of goodwill, among like the left or among ethnic minority Britons and sort of letting her back in, it could generate a bit of goodwill. And I don't think at this point in time it would generate that many attacks, because I don't think anyone's going to say, oh, Keir Starmer's in the pocket of Diane Abbott, but we'll have to see.